In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 362. This week on the show, it's a two-hander as Los Angeles Review's editor and review crew captain Kevin Gossett and I trade notes on LA's spooky season so far, which mostly means we talk Universal Halloween Horror Nights and Knott's Scary Farm, along with a detour for the Haunted Hayride, and a few asides, and a lot of shop talk about what makes these things click for both aficionados and the more casual spooky season goers. A lot of ands in there. But before we get to that, just a few quick announcements. There are just 31 tickets left for the Denver Immersive Gathering coming up on November 4th through 6th. The VIP tickets are sold through, but those looking to see Theater of the Mind can still buy a la carte tickets and experience it with the Dig crew. Over 200 creatives and professionals have already registered for the event, and these are the last tickets available for what is going to be the talk of the immersive industry for months to come. Check the show notes for the links, and I hope to see you there. And No Pro Patreon backers have access to a $50 discount, which takes a ticket back to its original price, just $150 down from the already bargain price of $200 for the whole weekend. And yes, that includes access to Meow Wolf Convergence Station. A few more updates. Actually, one more update before we get to the bagger report. The New York City Immersive Meetup on Monday, November 14th from 7 to 10 is now sold out. Yes, it's sold out. Everyone's registered through. Those who want to catch what happens at the panel are in luck, though, as the event is being recorded and will have the audio here in the podcast feed. And now, the backer report. Thanks to our latest backers, Connie Yu and Yu Yang Feng, we stand now at 383 backers, just 17 shy from 400. And that is our goal for the month, as improbable as it is. Make no bones about it, No Pro can't continue to be all that it has become in this media environment without your direct support. The only financial support we, meaning me, can rely on. So if you're able, please back us at www.patreon.com/noproscenium. And if you already do, or if times are tight like they are for me, take a moment to drop us a review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice and help spread the word. It's silly, but it really helps. We're also on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers, making it all the more worthwhile for everybody. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Ari Hurston, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Genties, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Mark Baltazar, Sidney Guillory, and Jan Budman. Thank you all for keeping us together. And with that, here comes Kevin and me just jawing for a better part of an hour. Hope you like it. It's that time of the year all over the country, but most especially here in Los Angeles. Yes, spooky season is here. And we like to get the team together and talk about stuff. The team, however, everyone's schedules are just wild these days, which is why we haven't had the review crew in a while. But today with me is the leader of the review crew, our LA Reviews editor, Kevin Gossett. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, yeah, it's spooky season in LA, and it's great.
Love it. I'm you know what? I want to say like I'm hyped, but like the truth be told is like it's kind of a quiet year, isn't it?
It is a quiet year, but it's also just like I just like fall and Halloween in LA. Even though it's been hot here as per usual, but I just like
But
this time of year.
not as hot. Like I feel like this is the most temperate. You know, I don't want to jinx us, but like I
It's
was
105
surprised.
next week. We'll know to blend.
Wait, what?
What? No, it's not.
No, God, you freaked me out.
I said when it is. We'll know.
Oh no. That's just the rest of this episode. It's just going to be me saying that. Like watching too many cat videos where they sound like they're talking.
The Elmo burning meme.
Pretty much, yeah. All right, so we like October 1st was actually like felt like a fall day, which I was like utterly shocked. I was like, oh, October's doing the October thing. We've both been to a couple of the theme park haunts, and I caught myself the hayride, and there's a few other things to kind of look forward to this season. And we just thought we'd, share notes on what we've been doing so far. So Kevin, tell me in great detail about about Universal's Halloween Horror Nights here at Universal Studios here in Hollywood, California.
Yeah.
Because I've actually never been to Universal, like Halloween Horror Nights. Technically I've been to Universal, like in that I've like gone to a press event in the Hogwarts area, but like that's pretty much been it. That's like all I've ever done.
You've never even been to Universal normally?
No. So like when I was a little kid and I lived down here, I was so freaked out by the idea of Jaws that buried deep into my brain is like an aversion to Universal Studios because they would run ads all the time and it always had the shark pop up. And like, I just didn't want to be near, like a deep-seated fear of great white sharks, right? Partly because I was born the year Jaws came out, and I think there was just a lot of ads for Jaws and a lot of Jaws imagery. And so I think it just like, got baked in there. And so the sad thing is that means like I never rode E.T., I never rode Back to the Future, like all those classic motion simulator rides of that era, never did it. And even though there's like stuff I would definitely like, I need to go. Look, when Nintendo Land opens, I'm there. Like, no doubt, no question. I gotta check that out. I've been on the lot a couple of times. But I've never actually, done the thing.
You should check it out. There's good stuff. I don't like it's fun. I don't know. Universal's cool.
Yeah.
The tram tour was like I think probably like the highlight, I guess.
Yeah.
We're around on the back lot, get attacked with a shark.
Yeah, I know that's the problem. The shark again.
He's back. That was always there.
So Halloween Horror Nights though. Like this is one of the two big, like there's anyway, yeah. So setting the stage for those outside of Southern California, the three big theme park haunts are Halloween Horror Nights, just portmanteaued something. Halloween Horror Nights, Fright Fest up at Six Flags, and which neither of us have gone to this year, and Knott's Scary Farm, which is the granddaddy of them all, which I went to. And so we're going to kick it off with Universal and Kevin.
Well, we can do 30 seconds on Six Flags because I did go, but I didn't do any of the mazes. I just went on the rides because they're it's the one time they're open later, so you get to ride the roller coasters at night.
Oh, that's really cool.
I enjoy doing.
We'll do that. We'll do that after Knott's. So, but you didn't do any mazes. We're off to a fine form. We're so organized today.
That's all I got on Six Flags. Is I went on roller coasters when it was dark, and I saw that there were mazes in the park.
And we're like, oh, those look like lines. Yeah. I don't want to do that. So, cool. So, Universal.
Yes. So Horror Nights is back this year as it always is, except for the 2020 when it was closer to the pandemic. So when I was actually like counting up, I was writing a little capsule on this and then a full piece. It turned out this is my 10th year going since 2012. So I think it's like, oh, I've been to this a lot over the last period of my life. So I thought this year was good. I always feel it's pretty good. I think there's some mazes that are like better than others. There's some that are fine. There's some that are just like, it's a maze. It's got a good set design. So that's what you can always expect with Horror Nights. Is I think you have these really like movie quality sets. They're like they look cool from the outside. There's good production design on the inside. Some of the masks I think they put on like for like the weekend maze, there's like people like with a weird weekend mask on instead of just how like actors use their normal face. So they do that periodically, which is a little weird, but I thought it was good. I thought there was some cool stuff. I thought there was some okay stuff. I thought there was stuff they could do better that I'm pretty sure they will never actually change just because they can't at this point. This is what the event is. So yeah.
Well, let's drill in for a second on the weekend after hours. So Universal's done crossovers with musicians before. I think it's usually like metal musicians, which
it's been Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath in the past.
Yeah, which is cool, but I gotta admit, like, doesn't in some ways doesn't feel special in a weird way compared to the weekend because like metal, you're like, oh well, of course. Duh, right? Like metal and the horror aesthetic, particularly like, you know, the slaughterhouse chop, you know, meat aesthetic kind of go hand in hand, right? But like the weekend, very different vibes as a musician. And even though one could say that Super Bowl halftime show was definitely horrific in certain ways, not necessarily like, oh yeah, of course Abel and horror go hand in hand. So what was the theme? What was the idea about this one?
So I think if you dive into like the website or somewhere a little bit, they talk about it. It's like his videos actually do use kind of like horror imagery and they trade on kind of that idea. So it's not as far-fetched I think as it seems. And you're like, the weekend? What the hell? Like, what are they doing? And so actually I think the beginning of the maze starts like they're sucking the ideas out of the weekend's head and like kind of like transposing them onto this area. So it's like you walk through like scenes from his mind as I think he envisions as like these ideas for his music videos or his performances or his songs. And so it's kind of these like there's like a club to start, and then there's like some weird like frog creatures, and then there's the kind of nurses who I think were in the halftime show, and it's kind of these like horror things that it's playing on, and it's like it was actually probably the maze I like the second best. Let's say La Llorona was my favorite. We can talk about that one in a second, but this one was definitely up there, and I think it was just because it had a lot of personality. It was like the most interesting kind of concept that it's like it shouldn't work, but it actually does, and so it's like fun to look at, and it's like a little different than normal just like horror tropes that like tend to show up in these mazes where it's like, oh, it's another like it's the scene from Texas Chainsaw Massacre around the table like repurposed for something else. This you're getting much different stuff because it's drawing from the weekend's kind of litany of songs and music videos.
I want to put a pin in this for a second because I have a question about what the actors in the maze were doing. But I think before we get into how that was executed in the weekend, I feel like it'd be good to establish a little bit of a baseline by talking about one of the other mazes. So you mentioned this was your second favorite maze. What was your first?
Yes. La Llorona was my first.
La Llorona, which is a returning maze.
It is a returning maze. So I think they did this version in 2012 or something very similar. It's just like it has this one has like such a specific feel. It's got like interesting like creature design, interesting scares. It kind of like it starts in like a chapel and there's like kind of people sitting on benches and you don't know they're like, are they actors or are they just mannequins? And so that's like it sets the mood in a really like interesting way that a lot of the Horror Nights mazes don't. And it's kind of a little bit like of a slower burn in some of these scares. They're like, or you walk through a hallway and it's like there's statues and you don't know, are they people or are they statues? Which is a little bit different from the common language, I think, of Horror Nights mazes, where it's like someone triggers like a loud sound effect and like flashing lights and kind of jumps out at you. So La Llorona is a little different. That's kind of like, what's happening? And then there's like some big like La Llorona set pieces show up as she's like eating children. And there's like this weird like barn sequence with these gory like horse head masks. That's cool. But that
when
one,
you say she's eating children, is there performer, or is there like a monster puppet
There is
thing?
there are a couple large La Llorona monster puppets throughout the maze, which are like huge,
Oh wow.
and are very cool. And again, that's something a little different from like kind of Horror Nights' usual beat. So you get these like, oh, like they have the budget to do this, and it's neat.
So you get like a large puppet that's like eating a baby like whole.
Yes, I like a child-sized performer, I would say, more than a baby, but yes.
Wait, so there'll be like a puppet and a person?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I'll find a video. I'll show it to you afterwards because
That sounds pretty dope actually. Because like Skippy had a little bit to like Knott's kind of formula for like a lot of the mazes are, twist turn, few visual set pieces, actors sometimes jumping out at you, and then like the last thing is usually like big animatronic puppet thing that's there to give you the last like bar, and then you're done. Essentially, it's like, that was the big monster at the heart of the maze, right? And like you know what you're getting into like every time, and there's something kind of weirdly reassuring about that. So what would you say the usual
I think that actually describes Universal's formula pretty well too. Some of them, like the big scares, come a little bit like closer to the middle, but usually it's like there's like kind of a big creature or monster, like something like not normal size near the end, or it's like if that's shown up a little earlier, it's like a little last, like they flash the title at the end of the movie and then like someone else jumps out at you and grabs you, type of thing. Grab you, don't touch you in the mazes. They try to stab you with a knife, let's say. So it's that type of thing. So I think it's probably very similar. Yeah. And then I thought the other cool one was Terror Tram this year, which is usually it's like okay. It's been the Purge for the last couple years, which is, I guess, fine. It's the Purge. I don't know. You want me to attacked by these people in mass so many times. So this one, so actually, I was going to talk about the Nope, the set from Nope first, but there was actually this like kind of silly gag in the middle where it's like Black Cat Alley, and they have these like kind of scary, kind of weird looking cats like jumping over a fence. They're like on stilts, like come over the top of you. But in between the scares, they just act like cats and they're kind of like scratching at the post. It's like it's like, this is kind of fun. This is goofy. It's like a little like weirder than I think it normally is. So
I like a weird. I like a weird, like the thing I've been finding, because like I'm not a born Halloweener, right? Mm-hmm. And some of that has to do with the fact that my birthday is like a week before Halloween, so Halloween always was a little bit of competition, for I was in competition with. And then I do love getting costume and getting dressed up, but like I'm so specific about it that if I can't do it the way I really want to do it, I don't want to do it at all. So I'm just picky. I'm really picky with my Halloween stuff. And there can be a monotony to the formula of a maze, or even just like the tone. That's what I'll get into and talk about Knotts, right? Like where it's like oh, hey, big hunk of meat hanging from the ceiling again. Right. What's that doing here? What's that got to do with anything? It's like, it's horrifying. And it's like, oh, is it horrifying? I don't know. It's just gory. And this idea that instead mixing up the tones, mixing up the aesthetics, keeping you uncertain, because for me, that's where the actual frights can come from, where it's just like, I don't actually know what's going on here. And that's what lowers my defenses and gets me ready to be surprised or scared or delighted.
Yeah, because I think like jump scares don't do a lot for me. It's mostly like people will shove things like really close to your face. It's kind of you back up, and sometimes sometimes they'll get you good if there's like if it hasn't been conga lined and like there's something coming in the room and you're looking the wrong direction, they like really get you. Yeah. So I do appreciate that, but I also I think that's why I appreciate when like a maze does something a little weird. It's like, oh, I like that tone change. It's like you were saying, it's like, oh, it's different. So I'll get back to Terror Tram just saying, because they have Killer Clowns from Outer Space Maze, which also it plays with that tone. It's like a lot goofier, and there's still like scares that kind of jump out at you, or there's like some big creature effects, but it's a little sillier and kind of like leans into the comedy a little bit more. and it's not necessarily like the scariest maze, but it's fun because it is different. It's willing to play with the tone instead of like it's horror and there's corpses hanging everywhere and there's meat and it smells weird. It's like it smells like cotton candy in the maze because it's a carnival, which is cool. So
That
I
is
do
really
appreciate when they change the tone up. But back to Terror Tramp, so yeah, they actually it ends with like a walkthrough of the recreated Jupiter's Claim set from Nope, which is just pretty cool to walk through. It's the whole thing. They have the giant inflatable of Stephen Yeun's character. It's there. It's the whole town. It's kind of like the horse where it's kind of fallen onto the car is there. And then they mash up like the kind of scares in the air, like a mashup of Get Out and Us.
Mm.
And it's trying for something maybe a little creepier than like jump scares. You can kind of see everybody, but they're walking in the patterns that like the tethered do, and some of them have the cups and they're like doing the stirring thing. So it's like a little creepier. I was like, oh, I appreciate this because again, it's a little like tone change. It's not quite the same as like it's another guy jumping at you with a chainsaw trying to purge you.
Yeah. Like the unnerving, right? Like
Yes.
I like that's the thing is like I think I really like being unnerved because like yeah, the jump scare, you know, the thing I like the least is like you're walking by and then they just shove their hand in your face,
Yes.
and it's just like all that's just annoying,
Right.
you
It's like
know. Like
earn your scares.
yeah, it's like I'm not scared. Like it literally does nothing for
Right.
me, you know. Like all it does is that's where I have to remind myself, oh yeah, don't hit them.
Yes.
But I also got to admit, like I when they do that, like then I'm like, oh, I understand why scare actors often get walloped. Not when we see videos of like someone going back and like hitting someone, you know, like after the fact, because I've seen that, and that's like wildly horrific,
Mhm.
right? You know, but like you can understand that people just getting startled and shoving someone, and there's nothing to it, you know. Like I'm just putting my hand in your face. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, you know, you've forced me to stop, or you've startled me, you know. Like there's nothing to it, as opposed to, you know, just being followed through half the maze by somebody, which I'll get to later. But like, yeah, that happened to me in one of them this year, and I was like,
Because
oh,
that's good stuff.
yeah, it's good stuff. Like it didn't totally, you know, do me up this year, but I was just like, oh, I appreciate this. This is a little again unnerving. I was like, oh, because you start to go like, are they going to do something? Like
Yeah, because I think
how's
that's
that
almost what I
looking?
wish, like in Horror Nights, with that they occasionally do it, where it's like you know something's coming, but it's
Yeah,
like I think because it's Horror Nights and they have a kind of formula at this point, it's like you know something's going to happen the next like 15 seconds or whatever. It's like if they let the tension build, and you're like, I know something's coming, I don't know where it's going to come from or when it's going to come. It would just be a little scary. Again, I think that's probably
yeah,
they just have to shove so many people through these mazes on a nightly basis because it's like there are so many people in the park. It's like it's crazy.
yeah. The dreaded
Um,
conga line effect,
yeah,
right? Yeah, but that is the thing, right? Is like maybe one of the reasons why this stuff tends to start getting just purely in the aesthetic of horror and not actually the tension building, because that takes time,
yes,
that is antithetical to get as many people through the turnstiles
yep,
as possible. Like, you know, like throughput and tension do not go well together.
no.
And yet, um, you know, well, how many people were walking through Jupiter's Claim?
Oh god, I mean, oh, I was gonna be like a tram full of people, but you've never been to Horror Nights
Well,
to
no, I know how many.
drive
I don't know how
anywhere.
many trams.
Yeah,
So, like, what is that?
yeah.
You
So
know,
it's like
50, 100 people. You know,
oh, probably more, probably a couple hundred.
a couple hundred people. Oh, the tram.
Yeah,
They do a couple hundred people in the tram. Wow.
it must be. I don't know.
I've only been
I
on
don't know.
smaller trams, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause there's like 5 or 6 cars in like the normal tram, so they like move y'all, and you've spread out a little bit because it's kind of like you're walking through the back lot and you walk through the you do walk through the War of the World set too, near that area,
Oh, nifty.
with like the plane crash in the town. So it's like you kind of spread out a little bit, but it's a good amount of people. It's a
Yeah,
bigger
just
open area versus like the normal kind of enclosed like 2 people wide of like the normal mazes.
yeah. And so having just things in the distance and just like people
Yeah.
watching you, you know, like
Yeah, it's a little
that
more
can get
unsettling. It's like,
yeah,
into this.
yeah, yeah, nervous. Having a flashback to the 1 year Warner's did it on their lot, which was an excellent event, but I think was just a little too pricey for relative to how big it was, and they never brought it back, which I felt was a real shame, because one of the things you got to do there, the only thing that involved a tram, you took a little tram, much smaller than the Universal tram, out to like the lake set, and they had set up Friday the 13th there, and they had
Okay.
all of these like campers running around, and then once in a while you just see Jason stalking through the woods and like would grab one and like pull them off, and it was dark. It was like Game of Thrones day for night dark, right? It was like gloomy and just like, oh, don't really know what's happening. And that one was, and we went twice because it was totally awesome, but also the hair, stood up on the back of my neck a little bit, because like it was surprising. Very, very good mazes. I wish they'd bring that event back, but I think it lost a bunch of money.
I'm sure, because you got to shove people through, and you gotta get that money back.
Yeah. All right. So Jupiter's Claim, Terror Tram. Let me roll it back here, right? We sort of established the baseline, what a scare actor does in these things. So were they doing the same stuff inside the weekend, or did they have a totally different kind of pattern here?
It was similar. So it's maybe not shoving something in your face every time. It's a little bit more jumping out of, or no, I guess they like the nurses are in like a bathroom and they're coming at you with knives. It just felt like, I think it was, again, we were talking about with like tone. It's like, it's people dressing kind of suits in these kind of weird horror adjacent elements without being kind of the standard. It's Halloween. It's Michael Myers like coming at you with a knife, or it's like there's corpses hanging here, or there's bags of meat hanging here, whatever. So it was, I think, different. And I think that's probably why I responded to the Weekend Light Running, because they're just kind of like, they're playing in the horror landscape, but it's not quite like the normal stuff you get.
Right. But even then, the scare actors are still following a little bit of the same pattern, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other notes on Universal before?
I guess I'll spend 30 seconds on it. They had one that I was pretty excited for, because it was Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy all together in a maze. It was really disappointing. It wasn't very scary. There's not a lot of either of the three of them.
Was it at least in black and white?
Nope.
No.
No. That would have been a cool idea for maze. They've done 3D, but a black and white one would be neat. And I think it was coming off the high point of the Bride of Frankenstein maze last year, which was like super cool and like told a story. This one was just kind of like, you got the like three of the big ones together and you kind of did this with it. Like, what? You do so much more.
And also kind of like raises a question of like, why didn't they bring Bride back? Because they do bring, I mean, everyone brings mazes back, particularly like new mazes. They usually have a few years worth of life in them. But I'm wondering if it got bad notes because it was like too story driven or something like that. It was considered maybe it's considered a failure.
I think it was, I was seeing a lot of stuff that was like really popular last year. Based on like the kind of like people that rank mazes or whatever. Like it seemed like that was at the top because it was cool. It was different. Like it told the story. But I think it was like they probably were like, we can use these three of the Universal monsters this year, and it just kind of didn't live up to, I think, kind of some of the past ones that have played with the Universal monsters.
Word. Well, I tackled Knott's this year, in large part thanks to our friend Juliet, who still has the in with the PR folks over there. And went on opening night, and I did my first run at Knott's last year, and really, really enjoyed it. Knott's is one of the parks of my childhood. I have a lot of memories of, and also, of course, Ghost Town Alive is, this classic, immersive theater experience in a theme park, that was developed there, and has reinvigorated the Ghost Town section of that park, and indeed become like a huge attraction for what used to just be sort of dead space in the park, which is just totally brilliant. And as noted, Knott's is kind of the granddaddy of it all. It was the first big theme park haunt. And you haven't been, and I encourage you to go, maybe even this year if you can squeeze it in. I think it's worth it, even just from the historical standpoint.
Yeah,
they had two new mazes
every year.
Yeah,
it's
no, you
like
gotta
it's hard
go,
to
man.
get down there sometime, and it's like,
It does take, it does take a minute, but it's totally worth it. And if you plan it out right, get the buffet, so you've got the eating. I know you're a foodie, so I know it. Like, and they go that route. It's worth doing up, right? You get like an extra hour, you get early access. Yeah, no, it's worth it. It is worth it. That being said, I was disappointed this year. It's totally worth it, but snob that I am. No, they had 2 new mazes this year, and both of them were trying something different, and so I appreciate that. So the first one, and I think literally the first one that Juliet and I walked through was Grimoire, and it started off with a scene. And it was clear, like you were going through like a little bit of a pre-maze, and you saw some graffiti on the wall, and then you like go into like you're in this like campsite, and there are 3 actors dressed up like teenagers from the 80s, and they've got this, they've got a grimoire in their hands, and they're doing the thing. And this is often the thing you'll find in these scare actor scenarios where like there's a recorded track and they're lip syncing to what's going on. Right?
So that is also a big thing in Horror Nights. Yeah,
and that's. There's nothing unusual about that. It's just like one of the tropes, of the thing. And so they're doing a whole thing like, oh, grimoire, this and blah, 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 that, right? So like, we found this cool book and like, let's read a passage from it, like grimoire. And you're like, oh, wow, you're dumb. And then this big, pluff of steam comes out, so much so that we could not see where the hell we were supposed to go next. And then you go through a tent, and then you're working through these different there's different scenes, these different eras. You're kind of like going through the pages of the book, as it were, like all these different times when the book was used and was called upon. So there's like kind of a what feels like a colonial era sequence, and then there's World War I sequence, and then there's like 1950s Americana sequence, and then and all that's in black and white. Amazingly, right? Which is cool. And then you're kind of like, you kind of pop back out into a campsite and like go like, oh no, like something bad has happened, we got to go get the book. And then you could go through like there's like kind of a jungle-y setup, and like honestly it gets a little generic-y. There's just like hell pit with trapped children, and you are kind of walking through what I think is like repurposed other attraction zone, because like we were walking over some bridges that feel like they're going over water, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. But what was interesting about the structure of it is that you did have these sequences where it felt like, like, oh, here's a scene that's going to play out, and here's a scene that's going to play out. Like there was one where in the 1950s one, there's like the father at the table and he's talking, like, and again, it's like, oh, we're all here to celebrate the blah, 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 whatever they're saying. And then there's like the mother in the kitchen, and, she's like shouting at you and, telling you you've got to go through the refrigerator, which is like totally like, oh, someone's been to Meow Wolf Santa Fe. But what made it all suck was that it was in conga line mode. So it was just go through. So you have all of this structure here for like, spend some time with this actor and now go here and now go there. And instead it was just like a whip past, whip to the point where you're like, why build it if you're not going to use it? And there's clearly some like Stranger Things aesthetics going on with like the kids, but like at the beginning and in the middle. But the storytelling that they're trying to do, like it's all possible to sort of piece it together. And there's actually some video walkthroughs online that make a lot more sense than the actual experience of it. And I understand that part of it is like you go through and then you're supposed to go through again and pick up more details. But I gotta say that, by comparison, there's an earlier maze, like an older maze at Knott's, called Origins, which is very tied to the park's mythology. There's like the Green Witch, which is like a whole thing with Knott's. And there's like a whole idea of like there's a curse on Calico and whatnot. And so they built this whole maze around some of the mythology they've built up around the park, at least for, scary farm time. And it does so well of visually telling a story as you progress through the rooms. There's all these elements where you watch the witch kind of go from like a woman who is condemned to being like full on Wicked Witch of the West, Green Witch. Like she's deteriorating as you're going through, and they're doing a lot of that with screens, but it's all done really well. And then like the culminating thing is you wind up in a room with her and she's flying around, right? So it all builds. It's still, in terms of like narrative haunts that I've seen that are strictly just being haunts, the most effective in terms of storytelling.
And that's interesting, because I think that's something that maybe Horror Nights doesn't do a lot of. It more trying to put you like in a movie, so you're like seeing like the key scenes, and a little bit less storytelling. So are there as many scares here, or is it just kind of like these kind of like set pieces to tell the story in these ones? How does that work?
So like Origins, I mean, like the scares, such as the scares are, I think for both Grimoire and Origins, you know, it's like bang, you know, like pretty typical scare actor stuff. And like the big monster at the end thing, I mean, you know, truth be told, like I the most effective stuff at Knott's for me is creepy, not scary.
Yeah.
Like there's Pumpkin Eater, which is one of the mazes, which is Havian's Last Hurrah. Last year felt a little sparse, but this year just it's weird and creepy. You're inside a pumpkin, there are rats at points, and everything's just kind of got this like, it's just kind of like, if there's an icky, gross, but not like charnel meat walker thing.
Right.
And so nothing to, I think some of there's one called, I think it's The Depths, maybe it's The Deep. Sorry, someone's screaming right now. But that one's like an undersea one, and it's got some like shark head mask guys and piranha face guys, and like that stuff, you know, I've got like the ancient terrors of, so it's just like, oh, I don't want to be, you know, like I'll get a little like weirded out by that. But again, a little more creepy than like full on, you know, scare, and not too much of the I'm chasing you with a knife thing, right?
Yes.
I think the other new maze this year is it's God, I can't remember its name. But basically it's a vampire blaster Bloodline.
1842.
Bloodline 1842. Thanks for looking up. So Bloodline 1842, you go into Bloodline 1842, you are given the choice of one of three blaster weapons, and then you're sent through the maze, and all of the scare actors, and there's a lot of them, like there's a lot of actors in this maze, and they all have like sensor collars on them, so you can like shoot them with the blasters and the sensor collars will like light up while you're shooting them. And then you're kind of like work through like scene to scene to scene. The music was very loud, so you couldn't hear when anyone was yelling at you, but like, you know, some of the other actors are yelling at you like, come on, we gotta go. And you wind up in a scene in a cul-de-sac, and then you get to like do a shootout thing, and then you got to push through the next one. And like the pacing on it I thought was really good, but the chaos of there's 20 people with blaster guns, you're just spamming, you know, the gun button. There's no score kept. There's no, like, you could go through that whole maze, never pull the trigger, and like it makes no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, what's the point of it then?
Exactly. What's the point of it? In fact, the big culminating moment, which is this kind of cool set piece where they're like all shoot out the windows so the light can come through. And then when that happens, like that triggers like something that falls that then like, you know, kills like the lead vampire. Well, if you're busy shooting out the windows, which is, you know, you're blasting the windows and like, you know, just a digital effect goes off on a screen. If you're looking up at that, as opposed to looking at like the people and puppet effects, then you miss actually the cool part. So it's kind of unfortunate because the story-ish they've got and the aesthetics they've got and the enthusiasm of the actors is all there. But the really loud music and the pointless blasting, because you've got 30 people shooting a scare actor wearing a sensor collar, and the sensor collar tells them like, you know, oh, run backwards. But there's no room for subtlety. It's like all, you just got to hail a gunfire.
Right.
oh, I'm just going to sit here and jerk my body. It's not a one-to-one of like, you got me. Oh no. Right. Like there's stuff that could be really fun here, but the need to keep pushing people through. And there's a huge line for this, right? The need to keep pushing people through just makes it kind of pointless. And that's sort of the thing, right? Like, when we go as press and you went as a normie, or maybe you paid for the VIP, but like,
I paid for the front of line.
yeah,
You
you pay for
never go
front
to
of
Horror
line,
Nights
right?
and not pay for front of line because you'll have a bad time.
Yeah. And that's the thing with all these things, right? It's like you pay for these front of line passes so you can skip ahead, or you have the press, and like they charge you a fair amount of money in part because if they don't, then like everyone's going to buy and then it becomes pointless. But like thinking about waiting for an hour and a half, maybe, or like an hour, 45 minutes even, to go into one of these things that's just a conga line setup.
Yeah.
Like I'm always like, yeah, man, like could I
Like
be
there are Horror
remotely
Nights
into this
phases,
that?
they get to like 2 hours plus on like the standby line. And
Yeah,
it's like, I don't know. Like, do you want to, you're going to get through like 3 mazes. And it's like, is that worth it? I don't
seriously.
know.
It's hard to figure out. I mean, if you're really, really into this aesthetic, probably. But yeah, I felt Bloodlines was a misfire because of, weirdly enough, because of the interactivity, and could have been much more interesting as a series of dioramas that you were going through, where they were telling you didn't have agency and you were in fact in real danger, or maybe just give the guns to one or two people,
Yeah.
and have everyone else like, oh, like shoot him,
Yeah.
like no, like there's some stuff that could be fun that could be done in those, and I'm glad to see them try. I'm glad to see them experiment, but it was definitely
Would
it's
it would almost be better as like a premium add-on where there's like 10 people going through it at a time instead of 20 to 30?
Oh, I think, yeah, like an, I mean, I don't want to encourage these places to be doing like
Yeah.
upcharges on stuff, but like,
But
it'd be better experience.
yeah. Yeah, no. Sometimes you gotta pay for the better experience.
Two more notes on Knott. One, which is Dark Ride, which is the other one that's going away this year, is really fun. It's like a corrupted carnival dark ride is the theme. It's just really smart theming, really well done. Beautiful in the appropriateness of like matching the setting, to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm sad this is going away. And I'm kind of shaky on whether or not like they're up to like making something worth replacing it, because last year they introduced Mesmer, which
You were pretty big on this one last year, right?
I was gaga over it. Like we went multiple times into that one because it was weird and creepy and beautiful and disturbing in this way of like, it felt like a real journey into madness, a journey into like the dark, reaches of your mind in a fully turn of the 20th century carnival aesthetic, like just unlike anything else in the park. Real, David Lynch vibes to the whole deal through like the carnival theme park aesthetics, but just top notch. And I guess it wasn't popular with the hardcore crowd because this year, the second you walked into the opening tent, the scene zero, which last year was like a weird mesmerism show, was just a burned out husk of body parts. And I was like, oh God. Yeah. And so they just added some hunks of meat to the whole deal and like turned down the lights and like put some ookie all over the place. And, maybe it was just that the actress who had last year had the cool job of, playing the violin on her exposed arm, which was just like a really weird visual. Like she wasn't in there that time maybe, but there was like a dummy of her, but like I guess there's also a dummy of her like when you went through last year, and there was the actress, but also just like could have been like, oh, we're just pulling the resources out of this one. But the fact that like the
Yeah.
very framing at the start was like charred meat. You know what this needed? You know what the classic 19th century oh no, sorry everybody. Sometimes I do that. I will not do that voice. I apologize. But really, it felt like what somebody somewhere said. You know what this needs is some charred meat, because
More
that's what people come to.
corpses.
Yeah, that's what people come to Knott's for.
Yeah.
Is charred meat, and I was heartbroken by that.
And I think that's interesting. That's something I was kind of like trying to muse on in my piece is like, if will people stand for like making things a little like weirder and less like kind of formulaic? And maybe the answer, as it turns out with Mesmer, is no, which is disappointing. But
yeah, I mean, like, take for instance, I just went this past week to the LA Haunted Hayride. My first time to the Haunted Hayride. It's being run by 13th Floor Productions this year, who have a lot of haunts all over the country. They're the production company that is producing Delusion these days. They're producing Shacktober over at the Queen Mary, now that Dark Harbor isn't happening anymore. And there were 3 mazes. It's a lot cheaper. It's like $30 for the hayride alone, $40 for the 3 mazes in the hayride. And on a certain level, you're getting what you pay for. Everything that feels like it's out of like the catalog of haunt stuff, or the trade show floor. And not too much effort is put into disguising it. Like every big, here's the monster that pops out and goes, "Roar." Well, they all make the same really loud noise, and they're all on these like spindly mechanical contraptions, and you see like them all over the place, and there's no attempt to disguise it, which
I recognize those 12-foot tall skeletons from Home Depot.
Well, no. Like these are not those. Right. At least it's not that. Although I got to say that a Jackson Bones has a little more meat on his bones than some of the spindly skeletons like up in this mug. I mean, it's kind of like, look, it's got real carnival vibes, and like people are standing in line, people are paying money, people go back every year. Like they like the basic aesthetics of horror. It is funny to watch a bunch of high school students. Like there was a group in one that I went through, there were like 4 girls and 1 boy, like in front of me. And like, you could tell that boy was having the time of his life, because those girls were definitely freaked out at certain points. And then they were all taking like Instagram photos in front of, and getting the photo shoot just right in front of like the trick or treat merry-go-round thing with like the spectral horses. It's like everyone's there to have that, quick adrenaline hit. And there were moments in there. Like there was the Midnight Mortuary one. Like that was one where there was a scare actor who followed me through like half the maze. And that was creepy. I was really like, oh, what is dude gonna do something? Like, I don't know. And then on to the rest of it. And like, just like, here's a mannequin, here's some gore, here's a loud sound. And I just wanted just like a wee bit more effort, because like there was a very Linda Blair exorcism like pop out creature thing like in that one. And if there was just a little more effort put into like making it be a surprise, or hiding the mechanics of it, it would have been kind of actually really effective. Like it was a nifty little thing, even though it was like kind of, feels like off the shelf, but like everything feels off the shelf. Everything feels like, we're going to give you exactly what you're expecting. And I guess people like that. I will say that the hayride itself was kind of really disappointing and super formulaic, because almost every scene was like, and here comes guy with pig mask and sledgehammer, bang, bang on the side of the hayride. Okay. Here comes guy with chainsaw. I'm going to hold this close to your head. Right. Like, which, it's like, okay, I'm unnerved by that. But there were moments like there's one point you're driving through and there's like someone in like a chintzy gray alien costume, and there were like two girls like in cages at the end of this thing. But the chintzy gray alien costume, the guy was just like waving the hayride on in the costume, and then you get to where the girls are, and they're like, "Oh, help us, get us out of here!" Right, which is
Like,
a
he's
little bit more
friendly, man.
effective, right? But like, would have been way more interesting if like the gray alien was tormenting them or just kind of
Yeah.
being creepy to them, and they're like yelling at us to like save them from the gray alien. Like, it doesn't take. There were moments where I thought like, oh, this is gonna go. It didn't. Like you pull up in front of a vampire bar and then there's like a sound thing that happens and they're like all like, oh, it's fresh meat. And then it's just two actors going around going, hey, ha, ha. Like every other thing was two actors going around going, and it's like, you do that for 10 minutes straight over and over again. And it's just like,
Very fun time.
can you come up with something else?
Yeah.
Like anything else? Like do like a I don't know, like a heart sacrifice thing, like just do something gory, some Grand Guignol. There's so much inventiveness, there's and you got to imagine there's a lot of human creativity available to them in the just in general, but also specifically here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we got a big Halloween scene here. There's
It's like it's like that's what you got. I've come to take your soul. Now I'm going to walk around the tram and go, ah.
Cool, man. It's happened like 3 times tonight. It's fine.
Yeah. By the end, it's just a farce. And so I came out of that, like, and that was the first thing I did. I was like, I'm going to do the hayride first. I'm going to do the signature. And I was like, well, my expectations are set. But the some of the other mazes, they're solid. They're solid, and if you have people who react to jump scares, and I think for a lot of people, that's the thing, right? You go with a big friend group, you got a couple of people who are susceptible to jump scares, and you have a blast because you're just waiting for them to pop off. Right. And if you're looking for a deeper fright, it's not gonna, or you're looking for something aesthetically strange or just creepy, not, go to the weirder immersive stuff.
Yeah, and there's one I wish I'd checked out before we were talking about some podcasts, but I know on Thousand Oaks there's the Reign of Terror, which I think is like a fairly lengthy haunted house type thing in California. So maybe at some point I will hit that this season and talk about it somewhere.
Yeah, hit it up, report back. And there's a lot of course, there's a lot of extreme haunts out there. There's what is it, 17th Door down in Orange County, which likes to like do like electroshock stuff at points, like tingler seats, and I think they were doing bug eating one year, like and that sort of stuff. I just kind of like I have zero interest, like I'm not interested in being hazed. It's like hazing horror, not my deal, which is a little bit sad, I think, with 17th Door, because I know they do that sort of stuff, but I know they also have like this ongoing kind of Hell House style story about a teenage girl whose life goes wrong that they've been carrying over year. And like that side of it, I'm very interested in, like, oh, like an upjumped Hell House, but then it's like, we're going to put you in a seat and shock you. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I just no. But I'd love to see the story of like, her soul's been sold to the devil, even if it's like, ultimately like arch conservative Christian, which hell houses often are. And maybe this is that, or maybe it's just like, adjacent to it. But yeah, like, I don't want someone telling me like, put your hands in the pig guts. It's like, oh,
Right. So are we back in elementary school with the eyeballs? Like,
yeah. Fearful. No, but actual pig guts. Like,
it is actual.
That was what it was. That was what the legend was. And again, maybe just legend, but the legends around 17th Door were always like, oh, it's this and it's that, and maybe it's all exaggerated for effect because you want that mystique. But that's enough to make me go like, I don't know if I really want to do that, So, but I think I was saying that in part because you mentioned Reign of Terror, and just wanting to say, if you've got align on something that's, you know, not full on, you know, immersive the way, you know, we go and do immersive. So not necessarily, you know, a creep show, not necessarily something, you know, like, you know, Delusion in the years of old. Not even something like, I think, what Psycho Clan's doing in New York, and we're sending actually Edward's going to Nightmare, and
Oh
I'm like,
no,
I'm like, oh, what?
Edward.
What?
All right.
Edward may finally learn the lesson of like volunteering for everything. So like maybe this is the thing. But you know, not stuff necessarily like that where it's like super intimate, small, but something where like just some really inventive haunter stuff. Like I'm in the mood for it. And I'm probably gonna try to do some of the home haunts in Burbank this year because I'm really curious. And yeah, I think you should go try and check out Reign of Terror.
Yeah, I think I
See
will.
if we
And
can
maybe
find
I'll,
something.
because I think their like most interesting thing that I've always been tempted to do on their website is they run the entire haunted house lights out. I think near the end of the season,
Mm,
which seems like it would be actually scary because if you can't see shit, like
yeah.
the jump scares are gonna pop when people come at you.
Yeah. Although, like, I gotta say, like, there was one part of the hayride where there was a strobe set at an intensity where we were just blinded when we went on the corner. Like
Oh,
that group of teens in front of us, they were like all, I heard them go, I can't see. And then I got to where they were. And I was like, yeah, I can't see either. And like, and it was right around like a hay bale switchback back. So I was just like, I just slowed down and I was like, two things came to mind. One, yeah, I may trip here, which doesn't seem good. And I don't have like any like epilepsy issues, but I know people who do. And I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, you can't send someone with that condition through this stuff. And it's just one of those things that feels thoughtless. And it might have just been, you know, literally just like, oh yeah, we didn't tune it right.
Yep.
But you're kind of like, do you really want people tripping over a hay bale in the middle of
Sure,
your
sure do.
haunt? Particularly if anyone coming to fix the problem is going to be similarly blinded by the light unless you turn the light off. Like, I don't know, just this is one of those things where you're like, oh, has this been thought through? You know, like maximum effect on one way, but like also maximum damage. So the light of it all. All right, Kevin. Anything else? Maybe you'll go to Reign of Terror. Anything else
Yeah,
on
maybe
your
I'll try
radar?
Rain of Terror. Maybe I'll hit Scary Farm. We can have another round of spooky season stuff. But not really. I think it's kind of, I'm going to some concerts this month. It's less spooky season, more just kind of like, it's like Halloween vibes. I feel like so.
Yeah, definitely Halloween vibes. Like also did Boston Bar Bloodsuckers, which had its run already. That's completed, and that's sort of, it's definitely a spooky season because it's vampires, but it's more comedy, and so not necessarily what people are looking for when they're looking for spooky season. But it was a lot of fun.
Sometimes you need that. It's like the variety is what's nice
Yeah,
too. Right? Like I like a good immersive comedy is just fun too. I feel like there's not enough of it sometimes.
we always say that, and
Yeah.
it's always true. And so, and that show was a little more like it was a little more site specific theater at the start of it, and then moved into like an interactive mode. But like it transitioned well and totally worked. You know, like it didn't feel out of place, and it was actually really almost like worth studying. And I think Cricklewood Immersive, they've stated that they want to do some more monster and comedy mashup shows.
Hmm.
So hopefully, like they made in their advertising campaign for it, they made cracks like Frank and Seinfeld, and maybe that's just like a joke they did for an ad, or maybe it's something they're actually going to do, which I think would be very very hard. But also, you start to think about it, you know, you map the Universal monsters onto the Seinfeld cast. I think you can get there pretty quickly. Like
Yeah.
I think that's doable. So like maybe that's what Jansen's gonna go and do. So I don't know. We'll see what's coming from that corner. Yeah. All right, Kevin. Oh, and we know like other members of the team, you know, they've Brianna went up to Winchester Mystery House for Unhinged. Looks like she had a really good time. I think she also had a really good time. She checked out Hauntoween here, which is like a little more, you know, like Halloween fun. here in LA, and she seems like I had a good time at that. Is that a freeform related event? I think it was last year.
So I thought it was free because it's actually I drive by it every time I go to the gym because it's super
Oh,
close
really?
to me. It is not freeform this year though.
It's not freeform
It
this
seems
year.
like its own thing.
Okay. And then we know Cemetery Lane, which is the trick or treat that's happening over at the Heritage Square Museum, which is put on by the folks who do Midsummer Screen. That's coming up, and that's full on trick or treat action for kids. But like Heritage Square Museum is absolutely fun. So
Yeah, it's a super cool site. So
it's a great site. So really good spot for kids. All right. I think that's it for now. And maybe there's something else in this episode. So, but Kevin, we'll come back around soon enough.
yes.
Once again, I want to thank Kevin for being our guest on guest co-host partner on this. It's not, is it a guest when the team comes through? Anyway, thanks, Kevin. You saved us so we didn't have like a blank episode this week. So that's what's up with that. Lots of news running around out there, lots of stories. It is spooky season, so that means there's a fair amount of coverage of immersive antics out in the mainstream press. You may have seen one here or there. Not gonna dive into that too much at the moment, but I'm gonna note a couple of things. One, there was a report in the Toronto Star, a couple other places, but we clocked the Toronto Star for a couple of reasons about Disney signing a deal with the folks behind the immersive Van Goghs that pop up everywhere. Well, not all of them, but some of them, that being Lighthouse Immersive, which is based out of Toronto, and they're going to have an immersive animation, Immersive Disney, I think immersivedisney.com is the URL for it, exhibit starting in Toronto this December. So that's been announced. And of course, when it pops up at their headquarters, usually it rolls out elsewhere. It's an article that's not just about that, but it dives into this whole wing of immersive. And yeah, I get quoted in it. So like, that's one of the reasons why I'm like aware of the piece and excited about it. Is actually Parker brought it to me because Parker, our associate producer, also, disclosure works for Lighthouse. That's Parker's day job, and was like, hey, look at this is a big deal in our world. And I was like, oh yeah, hey, actually there I am. So that's something to be tracking at the moment. And this of course comes on the heels of Today Tix buying Secret Cinema, and of course the big $1 billion valuation on Fever from earlier in the year. So moves, lots of money moves, lots of deals being made, things happening as immersive as an industry matures. Also starting to see those green shoots again of immersive as a creative scene. There's some fun stuff that's going to be opening here in LA soon. I'm not just talking about the fact that the Stranger Things experience is coming down from San Francisco to here. It's going to pop up in November. I'm sure everyone's already seen all the ads for that. But there's something else that's gonna pop up here on the smaller scale, and I'm very excited about that, and we'll tell you about that soon. It's under wraps at the moment, but it is something we've experienced before, at least here at NoPro, and so that should be fun for everybody. And yeah, there's a lot going on. One of the best ways to keep up with everything, of course, is to hang around either our Facebook group, Everything Immersive, which has almost like 12,000 people in it, and things pop through there. But if you want to get down into the nitty gritty, swing on by the NoPro Discord, and it's a little more no holds barred when it comes to talking about stuff. Also, if you are a creator and you're looking to get your show, your event information out there into the world, don't forget to submit to everythingimmersive.com, because not only does it go into the newsletter, the only way to get in the newsletter, it's also how you get into our Twitter and our Facebook feed, because I do that now as well. It's not automatic. I sit there and I'm the one who types that stuff up. So there you go. And if you don't do the bare minimum of submitting, like, I cannot help you. Don't just send us a press release. Please submit to everythingimmersive.com. And as always, if you want to help us catalog the immersive world, feel free to drop me a line at noah@noproscenium.com or pitches@noproscenium.com. We've got a curation team who hops in and out and who brings us stuff, and that's really great. But we can always use a couple other cartographers, as it were, on the team. So feel free to give me a holler. Probably can't bring anybody on board until November just because of how much is going on, but we can always use the help. Okay. That's that for now. There's plenty more that we could talk about, but we'll do that anon, or hit me up on the Discord and we'll chatter away. The credits. Let's do the credits. The associate producer for this show is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. And this podcast is my fault. So I'm Noah Nelson, and until next time, I'll see you at the show.